3.2 External Projects, Project 6 Opportunities. So I wanted to put together this video. It is a video of all the samples so far rather than making individual videos. Wanted to put together one that was slightly larger because there are kind of developments of these samples from previous work where I've extracted an idea possibly. But most of the work has developed from Project 5. Project 5, the colour palette was monochrome, which allowed me to play and learn with my knitting machine more so. And also as well, I didn't really want to think about colour palette. I just wanted to start investigating and feeling confident with the knitting machine, and also start to play with stripes, the raised line of the paper. So I've had my Project 5 feedback on that, and during that time I'd undertaken Project 6. I jumped in straight away and began with samples. Normally I do kind of try to do the theoretical side of things, the academic research from the course materials, but this felt important because I knew straight away that I wanted to get it out of my system, that I wanted the samples to be large scale, because the next port of call is going to be using the body as a platform to look at the knitted fabric, contort the knitted fabric, see how the fabrics will move, and also dance, and the key of playing with the samples and having fun. So what I've done with Project 6, I have gone back to Project 1 stroke Project 2, where I initiated the school report, and I think that this was important. It was an important key point. I think the school report sample, where I'd used knitted words, overlays, and multi-mix media with plaster and so forth, to conjure the raised thin line of the marker pen for teachers' comments, and writing onto the plaster that had been mounted onto the knitted fabric, was kind of in relation to more of a fine art based, more emotional, with its connections and so forth, because the project is personal to me, because I am dyslexic as well as. But what I've done for Project 6 to form a colour palette, I've brought together the colours that were used in the school report. So I've gone for using the colour blue, ink blue. The raised thin red line of the marker pen has come back. Red for dyslexia awareness. I've recently done some research with Dyslexia is My Power, and Go Red for dyslexia. Because it's an ongoing thing worldwide, where dyslexia is becoming more positive, and becoming more socially aware within the communities of people, and also within the creative community. So that's where I started to build my foundation up for Project 6. So we are still going to be engaging with mixed media and knitting. But also as well, I do need to develop my knitting skills, because it can't always just be knitted sock knitting as a technique for just using mixed media to decorate the fabric. So that is an ongoing process, which you will see on my blog. There is a collaboration with the machine knitter who's teaching me. So I've done a small video that talks about that and where I'm at with that. So one of my first examples was to bring back the red raised line for dyslexia. And I've managed to find this fantastic wool thread that has elements of the greys, the blue inks, charcoal grey and black, and that kind of started to resonate with school uniforms as well as the school report. So as we can see here, I've padded my stripes, and this is now giving this sample a three-dimensional quality, which when I come to make my videos with another collaboration with a fashion student, we can actually play and contort and stretch this three-dimensional piece. My second sample, this came from a drawing that I'd done in Project 5, and it was just a monochrome black ink drawing that kind of had circles displayed on it. This is featured on my blog and in my sketchbook, and I just came up with this just as a piece of fun to engage in with mixed media that literally replicated playing with balls from a child's indoor dry pool, and I wanted to attach this to the knitted fabric. One thing that I do like about my knitting, and I'm discovering at the moment, I can use the reverse and the front, and I think this kind of replicates a suggestion for a school uniform, the colours and so forth in the stripes. I've been introducing the lines and so forth, but I just love this piece because this will, in the video footage, we'll be able to play and have fun with this. I'm going to attach it to the body to wear, and I'm going to get my collaborative student to dance and play. One thing that I've started to notice with this as a sample, it's going to start to introduce sound, which previously in 3.1 I'd started to experiment with, and this created a lot of interest with tutors and other peers. This piece has to be quite robust, so it's attached with elastic so that we can throw it around and have some fun. A secondary piece, which came from Project 5, was the idea of a line. So far I've been using horizontal lines. These are now vertical lines, and I'd gone back to 3.1 where I was looking and researching craft-based materials of the classroom, and I returned to the lollipop stick with elastic bands. Now this has gone large scale because towards the end of 3.1 project I'd started a smaller sample but never investigated that, so I wanted to bring this into Project 6. Again, the sample is large. We can either wear it as a garment, which I've displayed in some photographs on my blog, contorting this material, knitted material, around the shape of a body. But also, again, we are now looking at movement and sound. So again, this enables me to play around with the stripes, horizontal and vertical, use it as a soft fabric, and also start to consider the element of sound within the textiles. Again, it has a front and a back. With the rather nice yarn I introduced again because I'd started to think about the front and the reverse of my fabrics. At the moment, I'm kind of quite keen on the back of the knitted fabric. I find it more interesting. But here I used a red thread so that we were using the colour palette of the school colours, school uniforms and so forth, and the red line to make to be highlighted against the duller colours so that the red stood out. Moving on to another large scale, I went back to Project 5, and I found with Project 5 what was quite interesting. When I investigated and researched, again, a craft-based material, the pipe cleaner, this was nice and soft, and this allowed me to insert it into some simple knitting. But what that actually did is when I had rows and lines and stripes of the pipe cleaner, it would actually make the fabric become manipulated. So what I've done is I've made an extra large scale piece. That is the front, slightly changing and using some of the colours that I've used from Project 5 and the new colour palette for Project 6. That is the front. Seems quite popular with a lot of people, the stripes and so forth, when I've posted this onto Instagram. And when we look at the reverse, we can actually see all the wire pipe cleaners. And what this actually does, actually enables you to manipulate and play with the fabric once again. Now, I made this piece just after my tutor feedback, and I taught myself how to make a hole. So this will enable, in my collaboration with my fashion student, to actually wear the item so that we can contort and twist it around the body. But this is actually probably a key turning point for some further developments now for Project 7 and so forth. I also started to play with the idea of finishing edges in a different colour with the red, as we can see, and how to finish off neatly with things like crochet edges. And I think that this could possibly move things forward, which came from a discussion in my tutor feedback of looking at the raised line and the red line for dyslexia and using holes to take the knitting a stage further for development and contortion and movement around the body. Now, before I go on to the final piece of the samples, which will conclude this collection, I just wanted to engage in also as well that I still feel that a lot of this work is now resonating with tactility, colour. Obviously, I'm trying to get the message across that dyslexia is my visual language, but I still think a lot of the pieces, because they are now developing and having the boldness of the red come through, textile therapy, which I think is going to work really well if any of these textile samples were submitted into an exhibition. I would actually allow the audience to touch my textiles because I think that would be important. I think sometimes we have an exhibition and we're not allowed to touch the subject matter and so forth. For me, it would be important because I don't think I'm kind of or I'm trying to say that I'm not precious about work. But I think it's important for the audience to engage, to be able to see my ideas, my concepts, hopefully get the gist of that I am trying to convey my textile practice aesthetically in an academic way by using such a strong, bold and deep theme about dyslexia. I still want to engage with the idea of play, construction, obviously learning new techniques with knitting and pushing those boundaries forward, which takes me on to my last piece. And I think that this is probably a key moment with this piece. This piece was kind of pieces of knitting that had been hand constructed once it had been made on the knitting machine. And I the initial idea behind this was pages of a school report with lines, with the colours of the paper of the school report. And then I joined the stripes together so that the stripes were opposite. And then to make the piece of knitting bolder, I attached my raised dyslexic line. And then what this has allowed me to do when I mounted this upon my mannequin has actually started to bring out the idea of manipulation, placing on the body. We also discussed in the tutorial thinking about negative space. Obviously, a piece like this, we would start to consider the edges, the lines, the finishing off, but also as well as, I think this is important, this thin red line, the raised line, the twisted line, the looped line is important for the audience or the individual person to touch and play with these pieces. So moving forward, I'm going to develop these ideas with holes, more loops, and start to think about construction and manipulation of how the body will actually interact with the raised line for dyslexia.